Hello, my name is Will Knight. I'm the CEO of ShowX, and I'm here today to talk about women in technology and, more importantly, about getting the younger generation of women into coding at the early age and how we inspire them to do so. And I'm joined by the lovely Holly Boothroyd. Holly, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Holly. I am a Microsoft software engineer on the Cortana and Windows team. I'm a massive women in tech advocate, women in STEM advocate. And so my work really spans across internal and external activities. I work with the Technical Women at Microsoft Board, the DigiGirls Initiative, and a whole bunch of other things that are happening internally at Microsoft. But I also work with external companies like Code First Girls and STEMettes, and I've also created my own platform called Her Hello World, where I work to kind of smash the stereotypes about tech and really help mentor people and women to get into tech.
Brilliant. And obviously we met last year at FINA Hack, where we was the brilliant hackathon we put on for women at Queen Mary University. So we're here to talk about women in technology, obviously how we could do more. And although things are improving in the industry, and things like coding boot camps, for instance, where they're seeing sort of levels at 50-50 now. But obviously that's sort of coming into the industry at maybe that later ages, which is brilliant. But more needs to be done about inspiring that younger generation and about them getting excited about coding at 11, 12, 13, 14, GCSEs, when they're making those important decisions. So we've got some polls running through whilst we do this, and so for everyone now watching, we talk about code breakers at Bletchley Park in World War II, and we want to know what percentage of women were working there. There was 10,000 in total, so I'd like you to have a pop and have a guess and see what percentage of those were women. It's completely unanimous, so yeah, have a guess and have a go. So Holly, just sort of want to touch first on some stats here. So a report from PwC recently, or in the last year or two, was that people, youngsters still at school, were saying that 16% of females are recommended a career in tech, as opposed to 33% of male. Only 78% of students can name a famous female working within tech, and there's just 5% leadership roles in the tech industry which are held by females. What are your thoughts on those stats as a start? And is this something that you obviously know of and seen of, and what's your take on it?
Yeah, so especially about the first one about girls being recommended to go into the tech industry, it's certainly something that I found is pretty common, and something that when people reach out to me on like my Instagram page on Her Hello World, this is what they tell me. It's a lot of the times I feel like parents and teachers are very comfortable with certain paths and then maybe aren't necessarily thinking that women would succeed in these industries, and so they're not getting the kind of support and kind of encouragement to explore these at these kind of crucial sort of like GCSEs 12, 13-year-old range. And so they're not really getting this kind of experience to understand whether or not that they like these things. Or even I've heard messages from people saying that their parents actively discourage them from doing it because they didn't think that they were very good at math and so wouldn't be successful. And that's one of those stereotypes, again, where not everyone who needs to be in tech needs to be a programmer, needs to be good at math, needs to be any of these things. It's kind of this stereotype about what being in tech is really like. And I think we kind of need to work to dispel that. So we can encourage more women to go into these things and explore and try these things out. And this is why you end up seeing a lot of people going into boot camps later, because it is at these later stages that they end up finding out about computer science and software engineering. And that's when their interest is being sparked. So they almost have to do it later on in their lives.
It's almost like they probably get more become known of what programming is or how it works as an industry, that it is quite sometimes it's perceived that it's not maybe so creative as a vocation, and it is that sort of typical just heads down coding, as opposed to it is a hugely creative industry now, which again has broken the stereotypes. But talking about sort of the parents and the perceptions of how you is it our parents who, for the majority of sort of persuading us where we want to go? But if you look back in time, it wasn't always the case, because, coding was ultimately founded by women. We've got Ada Lovelace, who's recognized as the first computer programmer. Then obviously Bletchley Park, which I mentioned at the start. It's amazing that 75% of that 10,000 were women who were code breakers, and they were the sort of the modern day, top tech, like a modern day Google, or a Microsoft. And if you equivalent to the sort of GCHQ, which is the modern day version of Bletchley Park almost, their stats are 20% of their workforce of the technologists are women, and only 80% are in the cybersecurity. And it's
If you end up looking at the history about these things, these computer science roles, or these calculators is sort of what they were end up being called, is they were seen as sort of more admin roles. They weren't seen as these technical roles. They weren't seen as these kind of challenges. And so we were like, oh yeah, put the women on it. And as soon as they realized that these are really impactful, powerful, complicated tasks, that's when all of these kind of decrease in numbers came, because there was things like different campaigns that were run to kind of discourage people. There were educational barriers that were suddenly put in place, so requiring you to have a certain level of education, which women were not allowed to go to school for. And so you'll see this mass drop in the amount of women that are here. And so now we're kind of trying to sway the tide and bring it back to a level where it's more equal or representative. It's
crazy. In 60 years, it went from being sort of 90%. So IBM in the 40, 50, 60, 9% were computer programmers, so much that they used to call it girl hours as opposed to man hours when they negotiated wages. And that is a true fact. This is IBM in the 60s. And it's so 60 to 90% to today, which is just 17, 18, 20% is the best case of estimate. So it's gone so far the other way. And I'm a big believer that the media perception has got a massive responsibility with that we don't champion enough women in technology, that we create these heroes that are, Gates and Elon Musk and, Steve Jobs and Larry Pages, but these youngsters, they see, them as the sort of the heroes in tech, the inspirations. I think we were talking only earlier on about Ada Lovelace, and saying how that she's such an interesting character that she's never been dramatized in a full, whether it be a BBC drama or actual, a film. And the only case we could find which was dramatized, that she appeared in the ITV program Victoria, where she was seen as Prince Albert's love interest or potential love interest, who was also a mathematician. And which is absurd, because I think we all know who Ada Lovelace is in the industry, but outside the industry, to get those youngsters into it, she needs to be, championed and the modern day ones as well. So, touching on sort of modern day sort of coders, Holly, is there anyone that sort of springs to mind who who inspired you today, or who inspired you when you were younger, perhaps?
Yeah, so part of the problem that we're talking about affected me. So growing up, it was, I always knew that I was going to be a minority in tech, and that there was certainly like a few people out there, but I didn't really have any female role models in technology, even though I even grew up in Seattle, which is a home of a massive tech industry. It wasn't really until I kind of was brave enough to commit to computer science and get involved in the industry that I started finding these role models, because you really have to seek them out, as opposed to kind of having a lot of these role models be presented to us, like the Bill Gates and the Elon Musks and all of that. And so some of the people I look up to now are, I really like Hannah Fry. I think she's done amazing things. She is a professor at UCL. She's also come out with the book, Hello World, How to Be Human in the Age of the Machine. So that's a really good book that talks all about kind of like bias and algorithms and how we can be using them better. But she really makes a good point of getting out there into industry and giving talks and being on the TV. And so she does a great job of making herself very personable and very visible for all of these other girls who could be interested in maths, in computer science, and all of these other subjects. And the showing really what it's like. I know that's one of the big reasons why I started Her Hello World, was because there wasn't enough role models and enough people that I could identify with and get like lessons from. And so I wanted to make sure that I was kind of putting that back out there and passing on that hope for someone else, because we really need it. There's that classic phrase, you can't be what you can't see. And so lots of people are trying to do some work to make sure that we have more women and non-binary people being role models out there for people.
Yeah. And what have you, because obviously the work that you do with STEMettes, I know you've worked with some schools and stuff, like, do you know sort of what they're doing more maybe at schools at that sort of important age bracket to get them excited, to get them to because you know the figures that we see is like, you know, girls tend to outperform boys up until GCSEs in the STEM subjects, that there's the appetite for those traditional subjects that help with computer science programming, like, you know, maths and physics, etc. But then it gets to A level and they almost steer then more into sort of biological sciences, or more the creative subjects, and it's the boys who then follow the harder subjects that then flow into computer science. So what's happening at schools, you think, that's stopping that or preventing that?
Yeah, so I need to do more research about what the UK system is like, but something that I guess I've gathered over the years that I've been here is that it doesn't really seem like the education is necessarily even across different schools about the computer science resources that they have, where people are being pushed towards, sort of like we mentioned before. And so I know some of my friends, conveniently, they were really, really interested in technology, so made very bold moves, but they had to move schools to make sure that they could get into the program that they wanted or get into the classroom that they wanted, which means that they're suddenly surrounded. Usually they're going to boys' schools, and so now they're suddenly surrounded by a bunch of boys, which is going to, like, it's such a barrier already.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the big things. But I know with some of the work that's happening at Microsoft, so DigiGirls specifically targets girls around this age for those reasons, because it's such a important time. And what we do there is we bring a bunch of schools, usually about maybe 6 or 8 schools in, and show them what the workplace is like, really introduce them to some of the people that work here, show off the variety of roles. We get them to do a hackathon project so they can kind of have a bit of a play and be creative. And one of the things I enjoy about what happens in the London office is that we really get them hands-on with the technology that's being built in that office. And so they can kind of have fun with the technology and see the variety that is there. And every single time we've done that, the girls always end up saying like, oh, I'm definitely going to be doing STEM GCSEs and A levels now. The teachers are like, oh, I wish we had this kind of education in schools more. And so Microsoft has another program called like EduConnect, and a few other outreach programs as well, where we're trying to get Microsoft employees into classrooms and into schools, so we can continue to sort of spread this information and give them these real role models.
So and I'm aware of the work that Microsoft doing. It's credible, and obviously it's fantastic that, you know, because I think as we say, responsibilities with the media, but it's also with the big tech companies as well. You know, the value of that they are now, and the market share and the resources they've got. You know, I think it is, you know, looking at the likes of Microsoft, who are already doing it, but also, you know, Google and Apple and IBM and all these, Cisco, and I know Cisco do a lot of great work as well, so we work with them. So it is, yeah, and I think that is definitely the route as well. Like, you know, getting more companies, not just the big companies, but, you know, the sort of medium companies as well. You know, if you've got the resources, you know, if you're local, and I'm sure they're trying to do it, but maybe it's working closer with the educators themselves. But Holly, we are pressed for time, and I'm watching my clock. To me, that, you know, the modern day of doing these sessions online and pre-recorded. So thank you so much for your time. As always, it's fantastic to catch up with you and hear your thoughts. And thank you for everyone who watched this today. And please follow Holly on a Twitter handle, LinkedIn handle. She does some fantastic work, and I think definitely someone you'll need to keep an eye out for the future. And yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.